As I mentioned earlier, this afternoon, we're going to devote the afternoon to talking about one of our bigger pieces of work, which is the Better Start National Science Challenge. I've got quite a number of our team working on it, as well as teams from elsewhere. I'm going to give a hopefully brief overview of the what our work on the challenge in the next 20 minutes or so, and then I'll pass over to Steph to talk about some of the work she's been doing, and Eileen to talk about some of the work that she's been doing. Okay, so I touched on this in the first talk this morning, but Better Start National Science Challenge, one of 11 national science challenges covering key topics of interest to the country. So the topics were decided on, and then they got groups of people together to work on them. And there were 3 health ones, basically chunking up the life course: early life, better start; middle of life, healthier lives; late life, aging well. And we got involved with the Better Start one. Basically has 3 things it focuses on: healthy weight, resilient teens, successful learning and literacy. In the later work that we've been doing as well, there's a kaupapa Māori theme and some Pacific research developing. But across those themes, there's a big data team, which I lead and I was a member of in the first part of the challenge. And we work together with each of those themes to answer key questions that they are interested in that uses big data, so whole population data, mainly the IDI, or not exclusively the IDI. We're investigating, beginning to use Plunkett data. So here's the team. I lead it in the second part of the Better Start National Science Challenge. It was Rick Ordis before that. Then we've got a team working on healthy weight. So the liaison between big data and healthy weight, that's Barry Taylor, who's a professor, a pediatrics professor at University of Otago. Lisa Daniels is also at University of Otago, and Nicola Shackleton, who's with Compass and the Social Wellbeing Agency. Then on successful learning and literacy, that's our response is led by Jesse Kokoa at the University of Otago, Pacific Islands Research and Student Support Unit, as well as Steph, you're going to hear from shortly. Nick Bowden at University of Otago and Steph are working on the resilient teen side. Sheree Gibb at the University of Otago, Wellington, is our head analyst, data manager, knocks the data into shape and helps others do so. And Lisa Perry helps with the research management. She's based with us at the University of Auckland. Won't go into this too much because you've heard about it a lot in the morning, but mainly what we use is integrated data infrastructure because it's got a lot of the data that we're interested in. And the main focus still actually is the before school check, because it is a screen of young children. So we're going to analyze those data, probably most prevalently in the first part of the challenge with regards to healthy weight, but also a little bit with education as well. And a few things now, as well as some pharmaceutical data on the resilient teen side or the mental health side. Okay, so just in terms of what we plan to do, I keep talking about the second stage. I'll just explain that a little bit. So we got 4 years of funding, I think it was, to get a work program done from 2016 to 2000, must have been 3 years of funding, 2016 to 2019. And then we went through a round again of negotiations with MB about whether they will continue to fund us and what the focus should be on. And we got that funding, and they said we should work a bit more closely together, which is why we have now got these teams devoted within big data to each of the other themes. But in general, not us, because we help with this, but in general, the themes themselves have changed to an intervention focus. So they're starting to do interventions, which they weren't necessarily doing, or wasn't the main part of their work in the first part of the challenge. So this work I'm describing now is from 2019, started this year, 2020 through the middle of 2022. So for instance, the healthy weight theme, doing an intervention called Moi Moia, which is a sleep toolkit intervention. And what they want to look at there is there's various components that will help children and parents sleep. They want to see which ones actually work and which ones work for different populations, which is why it's called a toolkit. Not everyone gets every component of the toolkit, they all get a different component, different combination of components each. And one thing we want to do is do some short-term follow-up of that once the intervention is embedded using the administrative data, as well as simulation work, which I mentioned again at the start of the day, of, well, if you were to given what we know about how this intervention works, if you were to implement it across the country, what would it cost and what savings would you make essentially? Other things that we're working on is prevalence of overweight and obesity in, well actually that's more, using the Plunkett data is more looking at early weight gain using Plunkett data. That's work that Lisa Daniels is progressing at the moment, as well as carrying on the work that Nicholas Shackleton started looking at trends in age 4 healthy weight, where she showed from 2016 there's a decreasing trend pretty much across all groups in society, although the disparities remain. We want to see if it's carrying on. So in other words, whether obesity rates are coming down. In terms of what we're doing with the Resilient Teens group, looking at rates of ADHD medication use by age. This is following on from a paper that Steph has just published actually on ADHD medication use in children generally. This is digging more into the trajectories and how long children stay on it, and hopefully eventually looking at what the consequences of that are. Then prescribing rates and polypharmacy for children and young people in New Zealand with and without autism spectrum disorder. Again, Nick Bowden has just published a paper showing that you can identify, he estimates around 60% of, well, possibly 60% of cases of ASD in the country using administrative data, but you're obviously going to be missing some. I'll talk about that a bit shortly. And also they've got, the team leading that is called Habits, which is based at the University of Auckland, and they run a number of digital interventions, one of which they set up during COVID was called Araha, which was kind of an app for people who are sort of struggling with depression and other things during COVID. So they designed that and put it out there really quickly during COVID. They've got a number of digital interventions targeting adolescents with mental health issues. And we're going to do some follow-ups of that using probably schools data and maybe some health data, as well as putting together a simulation model that would, again, help see if this was implemented nationwide, what the benefits would be and what it would cost to do that. Successful learning and literacy. That's where the data on education and the administrative data sources that doesn't tend to be, or at the qualification level, seeing how kids are doing in education, isn't really available until the teen years when you get the NCEA data, which is one of the reasons why we looked at literacy interventions as one of the things, as one of the focuses in tranche 1 for that work. But we have got access to a survey that's done on a largest proportion of school children, the Progress in Reading and Literacy Survey, PEARLS. And they want to work with us to do some comparison work, literacy success between New Zealand and Ireland. Ireland, they highlight, and I don't know too many details, but it's of a country that's actually done things very well in this space and have improved early literacy in children. We're exploring the language, the data that they have in Plunkett on language spoken and the parents' concern about language spoken, and seeing if that has, as an early sign of school readiness, that we could pick up by what we see at the before school check. And the main intervention they're running is on phonological awareness of that certain sounds have particular meanings for language. And we want, they've got that intervention running in schools at the moment, and similarly to the other 2 projects we're working on with simulation, we want to simulate the benefits of those early interventions, and again, what it would cost if it was to be put in place nationwide. So that's what we've got planned for stage 2 of the Better Start National Science Challenge. I'll just briefly go through some things we've worked on recently, just a couple of projects. One is collaboration with the Social Wellbeing Agency to undertake an analysis of IDI data to develop area level profiles of attendance at the before school check. That's work that's going on at the moment with Cherie and Nicola and a little bit of Eileen. And this came from work that Cherie did in the first tranche of the National Science Challenge, where she produced a paper showing how many children and got a before school check, which is supposed to be a universal check of 4-year-olds' health and well-being. It goes through vision, hearing, height, weight, oral health, and a few other bits and pieces. And she published a paper showing that it's about 80% are getting it, and it's slightly differential by ethnicity. And what we want to do with, what we are doing with the Social Wellbeing Agency, is looking to see how this varies across regions of the country, territorial authorities, and local boards within Auckland, and also at the high level at DHBs, so we can feed back to the DHBs and territorial authorities about what's going on, so they may consider programs to improve the attendance at the before school checks. And that's going on right at the moment. One thing we did in tranche 1, as I mentioned, we did a lot of work on healthy weight and obesity. We showed, Nicola Shackleton showed that obesity trends were going down, and Cherie showed that it's pretty consistent across the country how that's happening. So pretty much everywhere you look, it's going down and going down by a similar amount. There was no strong evidence of big differences in regions in the country, no strong evidence for big differences across ethnic groups either. So working with Ngāti Whātua, they were interested in their childhood population and whether or not the prevalence of obesity was similarly going down or something different was happening. So yes, so preschool obesity reduced generally in Aotearoa, and very little evidence of regional differences, is the same going on Ngāti Whātua. And this is being done, or was done, to inform the existing programs and services that they have there to support the health and being of their children. So what we did is look at obesity trends using the before school check data for those with Ngāti Whātua iwi affiliation. And we've got smaller numbers here, which I'll show you shortly the impact of that, but smaller numbers here, around 300 children a year. And to identify children who are Ngāti Whātua iwi, from Ngāti Whātua iwi, we used the Census 2013 data, and where that didn't tell us, we went to schools data, but it was mostly based on the Census 2013 data. There are a few other places you can get iwi affiliation data. And basically what we showed is basically stable prevalence. The Ngāti Whātua group are in the solid dots there, kind of in the middle with the large confidence intervals. That's a function of the small sample size. So what we showed is basically it's stable. There's no evidence that it's going down, but there's low numbers. And those wide confidence intervals hide a number of trends. It could possibly be going down. No evidence is going up, no evidence is going down. It looks like it's stable. Okay, the other one that I'll just go through briefly and was published just recently was work that Nick Bowden did with a number of us looking at autism spectrum disorder and whether or not it could be identified using administrative data sources. So this is one of the things actually we've been doing, more as part of the Better Start National Science Challenge than anything else we do, is just explore the IDI and see what can be done and what can't be done with the data. So the background to this is there's no national register of autism spectrum disorder. So what Nick wanted to do is use the IDI to identify children, and by children we mean age 0 to 24 with ASD, using the PRIME database, which is Community Treatment for Mental Health, NMDS hospitalizations, and the Socrates database, which is a database of people who are getting disability support services, to see how many ASD cases are identified and what we think might be the estimated proportion of those missed, what the ethnic and socioeconomic differences are, and what the co-occurring conditions are for ASD children relative to those without ASD. The overall findings suggest roughly, was that 57 per 1,000, right? No, 57 per 10,000 have ASD, and that's about 1 in 59 of 8-year-olds. And sorry, take that back. The international literature suggests that 1 in 59 8-year-olds are estimated to have ASD. In the IDI, we find around 1 in 102 8-year-olds have ASD, suggesting that there may be around a 40% undercount. And what you see there also is male and female ratios that are in line with expectations from the international literature. Higher rates of identification in European children especially, relative to Māori, Pacific, Asian and Mila children. Lower rates of identification in children in quintile 5, but roughly similar across the other quintiles. And higher rates of identification in children who live in rural areas. The male-female ratio in each of those groups is roughly the same. In terms of the comorbidities that children have with ASD, there are strong prevalence of intellectual disabilities and anxiety and depression, and ADHD especially for children with ASD. And they are largely in line with international estimates, although if anything at the lower end. And you can see from the top panel that it was really common to have a comorbidity if you're a child identified with autism spectrum disorder, 90% compared to 32% of children who were not identified as having ASD disorder. Okay, just some comments on that. Around 3/4 of the cases were identified by the Socrates database, which is the Disability Support Services database. Given that individuals captured via Socrates were being assessed for government-funded disability support, it's likely that cases may be skewed towards the identification of those with more severe ASD cases and additional comorbidities. And of course, comorbidities themselves are under-identified. We've got service use for these particular conditions, not the presence of those conditions themselves, as we discussed earlier this morning about some of the limitations of the IDI. Sex ratios match international estimates. Comorbidity prevalence match some international estimates, so they tend to be towards the low end. I think what can be said then is you can identify cases in the IDI, and the cases you get show some of the same characteristics as you expect ASD cases to have, but it's not a good data set for estimating prevalence of ASD, and I would argue for most other things as well. You're getting service use, you're not getting presence of disease. Okay, so that's just a quick snapshot of what the Better Start National Science Challenge is, what our role is at Big Data, and what we're currently working on. We have set up a system now where we're working very closely with the other themes to implement their work plan to some extent. And we have resourcing for, and we're currently developing Māori and Pacific work plans with each of those themes. We utilize the Māori and Pacific researchers in the other themes because we don't feel that we can have Māori and Pacific researchers working with us who have the breadth of, or anyone working with us, who have the breadth of subject matter knowledge and subject matter knowledge as it relates to Māori Pacific in each of those areas, which is why we're utilizing the resources in the themes. We're doing IDI work mostly, although we're starting to do a little bit of work with Plunkett, and we'll eventually get on to do some simulation work. But a collaboration going with Social Wellbeing Agency, and I described recent publications on the obesity trends in Ngāti Whātua children, the ASD identification paper, and also the trends in dispensing. I didn't describe this, but a recent paper by Steph looked at trends in dispensing ADHD medication. Okay, so that's me. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Nothing from Liza? No. Right. Okay. Hi. No, Plunkett data are not in the IDI. In fact, to my knowledge, they haven't been widely used for research before. So part of what we're going through at the moment is just exactly how that relationship works. So at the moment, there's only a handful of us, not including myself, who are able to access those data. And because they haven't been set up with research in mind, you know, there's quite a bit of data cleaning that needs to go on as well. So that process is happening at the moment. I don't think it would go into the IDI anytime soon. I think they'd have to consider the implications, go through privacy impact assessments, perhaps talk to parents who are bringing their children along to Plunkett and do various things before that ever happens. It would be, I mean, from a selfish researcher's point of view, it would be a fantastic resource, because you have then amongst other things, a healthy weight trend from birth through to age 4 for maybe 60–70% of the population, as well as other things on feeding methods and early language and various other bits and pieces. So it's not linkable at the moment. And it's not even linkable directly with health data sets without some extra permissions. Made by Plunkett? Yeah. Okay, so it's in train, but both from the Stats New Zealand end and from the Plunkett end, I think it's going to take a while.